Back to the Hearthstone Championship Tour Europe Winter Championship. I'm Robert, we're the wing, joined on the desk by Nimsh and Sottle. Over the course of this first few matches, guys, we have witnessed Druid beat out Freeze Mage beat out Druid twice, a matchup which is traditionally very much favored for the Druid player. Sottle, you and I have been kind of talking about this. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, the list that we saw in the previous, in America's Championship, was more the classic list with Antonidas. This is a faster build with the Forgotten Torches and ignoring that Antonidas turn, which speeds up your deck by 1 extra turn. It's a list that came out by Cross, and he actually reported 71% win rate, I think, against Druid on his climb, which I don't think is representative, but at least suggests that the match is more in favor of the Freeze Mage than we're used to expecting.
Oh, definitely. I think we have to just rethink how we approach this matchup overall, because with those changes, the Torches, it's absolutely different. And even in the previous tournaments, we've seen situations where there was a Chasm Mystic for Druid, and he would say, Druid is definitely going to win, and suddenly, burst.
Right, so obviously Nyman taking out Nixley in that first match, but we're about to jump right into Diggen versus Tars. So I want to hear what you guys at home think. You obviously use that hashtag HCT, hashtag Diggen if you think Diggen's going to take it, or hashtag Tars if you are supporting the Frenchman Tars in this next matchup. But these are two players. Tars has won DreamHack France. We made mention of that during the preliminary broadcast, but Diggen is completely new to this kind of level of exposure. So let's go ahead and introduce these two players. First up from Team Melty, it's Tars.
All right, so Tars is the player who is actually French, but he lives in Spain at the very moment. He moved to Spain to be able to be open to the international scene. And he's really friendly. I think the preliminaries, he didn't come out as a friendly, because you really have to talk to him and be able to meet him. So he was one of the players I talk the most, I think, overall here. And he always has those interesting deck choices and in cards. He was playing Curse of Rafam.
Right.
Crazy card.
Very, very whimsical player, fun guy, but he's going to have a hard time against his opponent, Diggen.
Right, and Diggen for me is the very definition of the online grinder. He's played over 80 online tournaments in the January and February months alone for the winter season, and also has that mentality of the ladder grinder where he really likes the intricate decks. He likes decks that can grow with him, decks that he can play over and over again and really learn to master.
All right, so this is kind of a stark contrast to Tars, who has kind of said he doesn't necessarily value that ladder grind, or it's not super representative of how he thinks classes fare. He's more interested in kind of building his own unique decks and playing them in tournament settings and how they perform. So this is going to be a very interesting matchup between these two players. Nimsh, obviously we've asked the people at home what they think. Who do you like between Tars and Diggen?
I really like to see Tars win overall, because in Hearthstone, I think deck building is not valued enough. And Tars is one of those guys who's putting Confuse in a priest deck, and he actually had even some success with it. He was testing it for this very tournament. He wanted to bring the Dragon Priest, but in the end decided not to take it. But overall, I think Tars is going to take it.
Right. Sottle, any choice here between you, or any choice you like here?
I like Tars as well. I heard from earlier, like, he even likes to just play deliberately bad decks, things he knows are terrible, just because he might be able to learn something from it. He might be able to pick up, say, one card that can go into a competitive list. So I really like that attitude.
I was going to say, you two like Tars, and apparently so does everyone on social media. Tars is winning this quite handily. No support for Diggen just yet. Have to see if he garners some support from those of you out there on Twitter over the course of this match. But Tars definitely the favorite for the players at home. And
who do you vouch for, Robert?
You know, having gotten to know both players, it's really hard to go against Tars. He's just such a friendly, fun guy. Always has these kind of fun little jokes to discuss. But I actually really like Diggen. His backstory is kind of cool. Obviously, we'll share a little bit more with the people at home a little bit here, but Diggen's actually just a really cool guy as well. So I'm hoping Diggen uses this matchup as an opportunity to kind of introduce himself to the people watching at home. But taking a look at these matchups now, we see Warlock, Druid, Paladin, Warrior for Diggen, and Druid, Mage, Paladin, and Warlock for Tars. So how do you think these lineups match up, Nimsh?
Well, it's a very good question. Like, we see the Warlocks being banned, and for Diggen, I think he might be bringing the standard lineup of the, well, arguably most powerful decks, which is Patron, Druid, and Zoo, the Secret Paladin. With his Warlock banned, the Zoo being banned, Tars, it's, because we said that he is a deck builder, it might be hard to say exactly what he brought.
Right, looking at game one here, Diggen's going to open up with Patron Warrior, a deck which we saw a little bit of in the America's Winter Championship, but was largely overlooked in favor of Eversixion's Removal Warrior deck. And Tars is going to open up with what we can probably safely assume is just that standard mid-range Druid.
Yeah, unless he's going to pull the WTY Bill twist on us and go for the Ramp Druid deck with Kel'Thuzad in it, but I don't think so because WTY Bill's results with that deck left him feeling a bit Kel'Thuzad about things.
Wow, Kel'Thuzad, I like this, Sottle. This is a very upbeat, role-play friendly Sottle. I'm clearly starting to rub off on you, much to the chagrin
if you're
of a number of people.
If you're going to sit me on a desk with Rob and Nimsh, I'm going to have to step up my role-play game. Right?
What's your favorite Warcraft class, Sottle?
All right, moving on. So going back to Warrior versus Druid.
Well, Druid maybe doesn't have Kel'Thuzad, but there are still a couple of versions of Druid. Some Druids run double Living Roots and double Azure Drake, and some people still stick to Sylvanas. So do you think Sylvanas is still playable in this metagame, or is double Azure Drake build like the most common?
It's playable for sure, but I like the deck that's been sped up a little bit. Even going back to what we mentioned at the start about Freeze Mage, a lot of decks that operate a little bit slower have been forced to speed up as a reaction to really, really fast, intense decks like Zoo and Secret Paladin.
Right, and Patron is one of those few warrior decks which actually tends to have a reasonable matchup against the mid-range Druid, and that's kind of what has made Patron a staple of this tournament meta for so long, is its ability to, dance with aggro decks like Hunter, Secret Paladin, Aggro Shaman, but still have a reasonable matchup against the Druid, which is really one of the few few decks can actually say.
Absolutely. I think Patron overall is favored in this matchup, but you need specific cards. You need that Death Spite, you need Patron, and we see those cards are already in Diggen's hand. On the other hand, Tars will have to react with some minions before the Patrons are being dropped.
Yeah, I was going to say, Nimsh, you pointed out you need that Death Spite, that Grim Patron, those two exact cards that he has right there. I thought you were just counting the hand right now. This is pretty much the dream going on for Diggen right here.
I was going to say, this is the how to beat your mid-range Druid starter kit right here. You definitely need Death Spite Patron. He has 2 copies of Patron, which is great, because if the Druid can somehow marshal the resources to deal with your board of Patrons on turn 5 or 6, you've got another Patron waiting to go. I would have to imagine you'd want to see something like an Inner Rage. Well, not even something like an Inner Rage, just an Inner Rage.
Specifically Inner Rage.
Possibly, well, now, Sottle, you laugh, but it could be Revenge. That is something like a Whirlwind.
Wait,
which
what?
I mentioned Inner Rage.
Yeah, so I don't know what's happening right now, Rob.
I'm out. I lost
Again,
this one.
moving on.
Moving on, yeah. There is double Wrath for Tars, which is a really good tool to deal with the Patrons. So if there is no Inner Rage or no way to get 4 Patrons at the same time, then double Wrath is great to deal with that. If there's enough mana for Tars when the Patrons drop, maybe Keeper as well to silence something or kill.
Right, Diggen getting very active on the board, though. He plays down those 2 Armor Smiths. He has the Unstable Ghoul. So he's pretty much pushing or putting the Druid in a position where the Druid will not be on the offensive early on because did not get those Living Roots, no Darnassus Aspirant. We did not see a Shade on 3, so the Druid has to begin cleaning up this board, and it's going to generate a lot of armor for Diggen.
Yeah, it's also a great situation because it sets him up to deal with such a range of things on the next turn. By equipping the Death Spite, he has so many different attack values that he can combine with it. He can do 2 damage to something essentially with the Unstable Ghoul by proccing it and setting off the Whirlwind. So if something like Shredder comes down, he can use the Death Spite to chop down the first half, and then the combination of minions will give him the flexibility to be able to deal with any kind of 2-drop that comes out.
Hopefully. If there is Millhouse Mana Storm, well, he can still
Hey,
kill
Millhouse
it.
still dies to this board.
All right, what about like the Slippery guy, a 2-free stealth?
Sure.
Slippery guy, I remember that card. Pretty good minion, but it's going to be a Sorcerer's Apprentice, which Diggen is unable to deal with just this moment, and it is kind of an impactful card for Tars.
This is a super interesting turn to me because with that Grim Patron in hand, Diggen will be wanting to protect that Unstable Ghoul for his Patron setup on the following turn. The problem with doing that is that if you attack with the 2 Armor Smiths, you're suddenly exposed to a beautiful on-curve play from the other side, which is just Druid of the Claw charge into the Unstable Ghoul, which will then remove your whole board. So this is actually very, very disciplined play from Diggen here to pass up the potential 4 Patrons on turn 5.
Absolutely. I loved how he passed on the Patrons for now because he still doesn't have the second Whirlwind or an Inner Rage, but Inner Rage will be the only card to activate those Patrons on the next turn. Whirlwind, not really, he'll only have 5 mana, so he still has plays. Like, he doesn't really have to slam Patron on turn 5.
Sure, and Tars looking at those turn 5 plays, obviously the most common plays for mid-range Druid, nothing too out of the ordinary. Azure Drake, Druid of the Claw, possibly Sludge Belchers, and other decks. But Diggen is in a great place to just immediately deal with whatever comes down, even has those Armor Smiths to finish off that Druid of the Claw in bear mode.
Yeah, you mentioned the standard plays here, but I was just about to point out, I wouldn't be surprised to see Tars go with the combination here. Use the Wrath to clear out one of these Armor Smiths before they get too far out of control, and develop the Shade of Naxxramas, because any other play he made was just too nice a target for that Death Spite.
Absolutely, and it also set up the board for a possible Inner Rage Patron, where you will be able to trade in one Patron with the Shade, kill one with the 2/4 Keeper, and then kill one with the Wrath as well.
Right.
So this plays really well against a possible Patron Inner Rage. There is no Inner Rage though still, but Lotheb, quite a good card.
I was going to say, it seems a little bit early to begin making patrons here, Sottle. Do you agree with that, or...?
Yeah, I would agree, especially having seen the Shade come down. Like, the situation of 2 patrons plus another minion against an empty board against Druid is perfectly reasonable, but with that Shade in stealth, they'll be able to immediately remove your 3/3 patron anyway. It doesn't seem really too worth it. So the Lotheb there is a fantastic draw just to keep the initiative.
So now they play an interesting game of chicken, because you do expect those patrons, so you want to have proactive plays to be able to deal with them when they happen. But on the other hand, Diggen really needs to get that card that activates the patron as well.
He does have the slam, so if the Shade were to be unveiled or another minion is played, he would be able to slam that. Obviously, he could slam his own minions, but that's not really what you want to be doing. But I agree, he needs to be cycling and looking for Inner Rage, Whirlwinds, and those stuff that will allow him to just make these crushing boards that the Druid really can't recover from.
Absolutely. So, Salda, what do you see as the best play this turn for Tars? You still need to keep your Keeper and Wrath, be able to deal with patrons. Is it Druid of the Claw or Azure Drake?
Right, I mean, that's the issue in this situation, is that Tars will be looking at his hand and rationing out which cards he needs to eventually prevent a patron turn, because he's seen this setup coming from quite a long way out. He may have potentially got the read from the Ghoul being popped a couple of turns ago that there is no patron, but he'll still be very suspicious of it. So like you said, the Keeper of the Grove and the Wrath are reserved for dealing with patrons. So I think it ends up just being Druid of the Claw Taunt here, which is what he goes with, because it does prevent at least an additional question to the Death Spite rather than the Drake, which is just, hey, go ahead and hit this. Like,
absolutely.
And we're going to see, it looks like that first Grim Patron come down, and he did not find a Whirlwind or Inner Rage, so it's just going to be 2 patrons, but decides he needs to go ahead and start asserting himself on this board.
It also makes sense, because if he would consider Sludge Belcher, then he would need to use Death Spite to clear the minion anyway, and if he wants to use the Death Spite this turn, there's no reason not to play the patron.
Completely agree, Nimsh. And Tars looking at his option now on 7 mana, does not have the Dr. Boom on 7, not that he would want to be playing it this turn with all those patrons on the board, but as you guys have been pointing out, Keeper of the Grove there, Wrath, would allow him to full clear and be left with a 2/4 on the board. Do you like that, or do you feel as a Druid player you want to do something with a little more pressure?
I mean, you have the option to Druid of the Claw and Wrath instead of the Keeper of the Grove if you want to reserve the Keeper of the Grove for a more situational play later on to deal with potentially an Acolyte, to deal with the second wave of patrons, you know, all this kind of thing. But it just seems really clean here to drop the Keeper and the Wrath. So just picking up the full board clear over the Druid of the Claw play, which would potentially leave the Lotheb behind, just seems a lot more solid here.
What do you guys think about using Force of Nature here? It's like the outcome is a bit worse, because you end up without this 2/4 minion on the board.
Right.
But you do have double Force in hand, and you still have your Keeper and Wrath be able to maybe take care of a second wave of patrons if it happens at some point.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I mean, while he's on low mana, using the option he has available to him makes a lot of sense, because later on he can use a Force of Nature more flexibly to clear patrons, you know, in potentially combination with the Living Roots, with the Wrath as he has more mana available to him, and then still have that spare Force of Nature to activate the combo, which of course is just really important in the matchup. So I like the Keeper of the Grove play. It does develop the minion on board, gives him a bit of a platform to build from here.
All right.
Innervate doesn't look like it's going to be that big of a draw on this turn. He could Drake into something.
Into Druid of the Claw, because he got Innervate.
That is exactly what he could do. He wouldn't even have to draw it. He already has that Druid of the Claw. So he could play down both if he wants to, but there's not going to be anything super devastating in the way of a Force of Nature Savage Roar combo on this turn. So
right. The issue I see with the double 5-drop play here is that if you play that Druid of the Claw, you're probably wanting to charge it into the 2/4 Frothing here to prevent any accidents with Frothing buffs.
Yeah.
But if you do that, then you have no way of preventing that Acolyte to start drawing multiple cards by farming into that 2/4. So it's a little bit awkward. He may have to weigh up the relative strengths and merits here, but I think getting rid of that Frothing Berserker is just too high priority right now.
Yeah, I think so too.
Wow.
Oh, he actually decides
Value
not
the
to kill it.
Acolyte kill. Interesting. I mean, that is a creative solution to the problem. The problem I presented is that you couldn't charge into the Frothing Berserker and without giving value to the Acolyte. So he decides to just value the card draw even higher than this Frothing potentially getting out of control.
I think it makes sense in a way because, like, looking at the Warrior's health, it's 30, you have double Force of Nature without Savagery for the moment. So you're far away from killing the Warrior. So maybe the plan is to just deal with the card draw and be able to, well, play the attrition war and just kill all the minions that Warrior is throwing at you to not die yourself.
Right. He might. Yeah. He's looking at this board, and sure, he's presented him a free trade for that Frothing Berserker into the 2/4 on the board. But if that trade were to happen, that Frothing Berserker would go down to 2 health, which potentially opens up a good Force of Nature clear on the following turn.
And we finally see Diggen find one of those tools he's been looking for all game. He does get that Whirlwind, has a Cruel Taskmaster as well, so there could be an upcoming turn where we see patrons being made en masse, but has to decide here if he wants to get rid of that Drake, which obviously you never want a Druid having a Drake, or possibly run it into the 2/4 and go ahead and use that Battle Rage to draw some cards.
What about Whirlwind into Sludge Belcher attack phase with, well, a big minion?
Yeah, I mean,
that looks like that's what he's going for.
It's a play that jumped out at me as soon as the Whirlwind was drawn as well. It's definitely the aggressive line, and it means that whenever you draw Grom, pretty much, you're going to be threatening very, very close to lethal. But the Keeper of the Grove pickup here is a fantastic answer to this board state.
He still had a way, I guess, to deal with it with Force of Nature.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Big Game Hunter would have also been another really good draw, but I think Diggen was doing a little bit of math there, kind of to what you guys were hinting at. He needed to have basically 2 very specific cards to immediately get rid of that Frothing Berserker, and you'd already seen the one Keeper of the Grove, so probably felt a little bit good doing it, and this is still going to lead to a turn where Tarj can Keeper of the Grove, he can Shade of Naxxramas. Looks like he's hovering over Force of Nature, though.
I mean, as Nimsh pointed out earlier, these 2 Force of Natures are in danger of just getting stuck in the hand, so one can be used to very strong usage here to clear the board, so it makes a lot of sense to get it out of his hand now. Still gets to develop the Shade alongside it, unless he feels he has to hero power to finish the job here. But I guess he's going to make the play that lets him develop the Shade and trade this Drake cleanly into the 17-3 Frothing Berserker.
Yeah, this Frothing Berserker is quite big. And he's still safe for the moment, but if there is a good activator... Oh, wow, there's a Whirlwind, so now we can actually play Patron Taskmaster and Whirlwind. It will not affect the minions on board that much, but there will be a couple of patrons.
Right, I was going to say, and using that Whirlwind to go for the Frothing Berserker gambit, he kind of made a hard line, but he's going to get to kind of have his cake and eat it too, by virtue of Cruel Taskmaster and Whirlwind. And then the won't have enough mana to Battle Rage, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the irritating part about this, is that with Battle Rage being your last card in hand, you would love to immediately cast it here for the 4-card card draw. And he's going to get the sad news that even though there's only 2 cards in his opponent's hand right now, they're 2 pretty good cards at dealing with this board state.
Right. Let's look at... Okay, so you have 2 3/3 patrons. You have 1 card, or 1 minion on board. Yeah, you're going to silence that. Then you run the Shade into the 3/3. And this is going to be a great spot for Tarj. He's even got that Drake to follow up. Get him another card, put another body on the board. So sad times ahead for Diggen.
Can you play the Drake, or do you just force to kill the rest of the minions?
So if you silence the 3/3 and kill the other 3/3 with the Shade, the patron threat is essentially neutralized. There will be a silenced 3/3 and a 5/1 left on the board, so there will be no possibility of replication. But I would also appreciate the situation from Tarz's side here of, hey, I'm just going to clear the board right now, and then that puts us in the situation where, you know, even if that last card is Battle Rage, he's not in a particularly good situation.
Definitely, you do deny the Battle Rage there.
Yeah.
There is the Grom.
Ooh.
Wow.
That's actually quite good.
I was going to say, I think you've seen 2 silences now.
Right.
Maybe consider just Big Game Hunter, but you can trade that into the 2/4, have this giant threat, and more importantly, draw 2 cards.
Yeah.
3 cards even.
Oh, yeah,
Grom's
3
damage now.
because of the self-injury, but that's the thing with that Grom draw. Like, not only is it such a huge amount of pressure on the board, but even if Big Game Hunter is ripped here, which there's still a chance of with the double card drawer in hand, even if Big Game Hunter does get drawn, drawing Grom that turn was another minion that could immediately injure itself to refill his hand from Battle
Oh man,
Rage.
this is so close now. Tarz needs to draw something. Like, Big Game Hunter is the best. Like, is there anything else? Because he's almost dead. There's 16 damage at least with the weapon in hand coming his way.
Right, for him to stay alive, he is going to need to find that Big Game Hunter to equalize the situation, essentially. But this is a matchup where, ever since Warsong Commander was nerfed, the Patron player is not necessarily a bad spot beyond the Patron and Frothing Berserker threats, but it's not going to matter here, as we see he does not get that Big Game Hunter. So there's a very, very upset Grom Hellscream, 10-7, ready to go to war.
Why is he so angry, Rob? He's about to win the game. Why would you be this angry?
He is shouting because he's Warzone clan. They're also always shouting and singing the songs, right, Rob?
Soddle, yes, Nimsh, but Soddle, to your point, there are some people, and I might be casting with them, who are just never happy. Soddle. But one person who is happy, Diggen, he goes up on this series 1-0.
Absolutely.
Patron deck locked up, all done for this series at least.
Yeah.
How important is it, Soddle?
I mean, it's important. I think you feel like Patron probably would have got a win against this lineup anyway, depending on what that Paladin deck is. Unless it was anything Paladin, you'd expect the Patron to be quite favored in that matchup anyway, and then there's potential for the Mage to be Freeze Mage. So I think Patron was a pretty solid deck against the lineup in general, so it's not one of the hugely important Conquest wins. It's a deck that you'd expect to get a win at some point. So Tars, now seeing that happen, probably doesn't feel like he's too much further behind than he was before a game was played.
Right, so two different players, two very different approaches to Hearthstone. Let's take a minute and see what they had to say about the prospect of facing each other.
I'm Taras. I'm here to do my best to the tournament. My first opponent is Diggen. He's a good player.
I don't know much about Tars. I believe he's a streamer. He's a respected guy in the French community. Yeah, I'm not really worried about not knowing much about him because I think it's gonna come down to our lineups.
I think the lineups are pretty similar. I won't say I'm better or not. Hearthstone is about being consistent. It's okay if you lose. Don't put too much pressure on one game because it can happen. Like you have bad draw, it happens. It's not a big deal. Next tournament, maybe it will be better.
I have a lot of experience under my belt now. I might get nervous and start playing bad. I don't think it's gonna happen this weekend.
I'll just do my best, focus on the game, and I can win.
Tars doesn't place too much emphasis on just one game, which is great for him considering he did unfortunately fall in that first one to Diggen, and Diggen put some of those heroic poses to use there and use them and some other good draws to go up on this series.
Absolutely. I think they're great. They are just having fun, and it seemed like they were not really bashing each other. They were like, I'm here to play Hearthstone, and it matters if I win or lose, but if I lose, I will not get discouraged.
Well, looking at this poll, even though Tars is down in this series, still commands an overwhelming amount of support. Diggen needs those people to go out there and vote for him and just get him on the board, at least in the poll. We know he's obviously already on the board in this series.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Pretty crazy to be 1-0 up in the series and so overwhelmingly behind in the polls. I mean, Bible thump, guys. Like, let Diggen win. Come on.
Well, I mean, he already is winning one thing. Maybe Tars can win this thing, but Tars has a great attitude going into this series. Like, it's very much, we saw it with players early on in these series. There's the potential there to get very emotional and kind of let that make you play worse as it was, or make suboptimal decisions. Tars has the mindset though, where he's just going to take it each game at a time. And you know what? If he doesn't necessarily win this series, there's always tomorrow.
Right, and I love the mentality from the video as well, where he said it's not about one game, it's about consistency over a long period. Maybe if you don't win the first tournament you enter, you'll do well in the next one. It's a thing that happens over time.
Alright guys, but the game is ready. There is Paladin versus Druid, so Tars killed the Druid again. We've seen that before. And this Paladin seems to be an aggressive Paladin with Argent Squire, Leper Gnome, and Soul Sea deckhand.
Yeah, when you look at those cards, you definitely think this is not the late game sort of mid-range Paladin we saw going on from Nyman. Leper Gnome, Argent Squire, Soul Sea deckhand, and Dr. Boom is always a good inclusion in any Paladin deck. Obviously, he puts out a lot of pressure.
Right, even in an aggro deck, Dr. Boom just comes down as that final back-breaking thing when your opponents had to commit all their removal so desperately to clearing out your small minions because they're under so much pressure. Boom comes down and there's no answer to him, so no surprise in even such an aggressive deck. But this is a really interesting matchup to me because I played a great deal of aggro Paladin a few seasons ago. It was a deck that I climbed to top 20 Legend with, and one of my worst matchups was against mid-range Druid when I looked at my statistics, which surprised me. It feels like it's a deck that should just be able to go faster and just like rush them out of the game, but it turns out that the card Swipe is pretty backbreaking when every minion in your deck has 1 health.
All right, that's a very nice humble brag, by the way. Top 20 Legendary, congratulations,
You caught that
Soddle.
one, huh? Thank you.
Yeah, Nimsh, in this matchup, do you agree with Soddle's assessment that this is hard for the aggro Paladin player?
Yeah, I do agree that this is a very interesting matchup in a way, because Paladin usually is very good versus Druid. You feel like with the cards like the Coghammer, True Silver Champion, and being able to pressure Druid very early in the game, you should be able to take the game easily. But then if Druid actually uses Innervate, Keeper, and follows up with Swipe, it can clear your board. Also, one of the most important cards in this matchup is Divine Favor, where Paladin just wants to just play all the cards he has and then replenish his hand with Divine Favor. Druid can also play the cards with Innervate and just keep maybe 1 or 2 cards in hand overall.
Yeah, it's another byproduct of, as we mentioned earlier, Druids going faster. When they start adding cards like Darkness Aspirant, Living Roots, whatever option of that early game package you're choosing to play, when you add those cards to a deck that classically kind of started at 4 in terms of board presence historically, then suddenly you're able to compete with these early game based decks more effectively.
And now we see that Druid actually has a pretty okay opening, I'll have to say. That Wild Growth is always good when you go versus aggressive decks. You'll be able to play cards faster. Now Innervate and Torisan is an option. Just Pilot the Shredder also seems quite good.
Right,
Yeah.
these plays, I was going to say, represent 2 very different lines of play here, and I think this is kind of the decision that's going to factor out the rest of the game.
Yeah, Tars, I mean, I don't blame him for this play at all, but he will be shutting his eyes right now and hoping that the card Blessing of Kings does not exist, but he's going to get the unfortunate news very quickly that not only does 1 copy of it exist, there's in fact 2, but only one's going to come down and punish him this turn. But he has sped up his hand now where he can start competing with this board development play from the Paladins, just at a slightly faster pace.
Yeah, it's not like he really could have played around it. Even if you play Piloted Shredder, it will still, well, no, it will actually go for face there probably. So then you have to have reactive plays.
Right.
But right now, at least, he has a bit of a lower cost on minions.
You want to point out, too, that playing Thaurissan did not change what his turn 5 play is ultimately going to be here. So that is one of those things where Shredder would have stuck to the board better, fought, and you didn't necessarily have the sort of hand that needed to be discounted for Thaurissan at this moment. But like you said, I understand the play, and it's always, when you see the ability to put out Thaurissan, you just think, all right, don't have Blessing of Kings.
Right. I mean, like, Coghammer would have been effective there to clear as well, but, like, Blessing of Kings was the only thing that could deal with the immediate threat of Thaurissan, which you feel obligated to do as the opposing player, and increase the pressure on the board at the same time. So it's a solid line from Tars, just to, like I said, close his eyes, hope for no Blessing of Kings. Didn't work out that way for him this time.
And now he hopes there is no Coghammer that will land on the 5/5.
I mean, you can even like take the solid play here and just like trade the Leper Gnome in first. I mean, this is one of those kind of real feel plays where you just need to evaluate. Yeah, I can take the 50-50, but how much worse than 50-50 is that for me if it hits the Leper Gnome? And you just have to evaluate how you feel about the line.
I think like even if it lands in Leper Gnome, it's not bad for you being a Paladin. You just go face with everything, like even with a weapon. And then Leper Gnome has Taunt and Divine Shield.
Yeah.
It's like asking Druid, hey, can you please go for my Leper Gnome? He's waiting for you.
Nimsh's dream, buff Leper Gnome to have Taunt and Divine Shield, yeah.
It's a very noble dream, and it's a dream we all share, Nimsh. Buff Leper Gnome.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Keeper of the Grove is pretty spicy here as one of the few things that could punish him for not taking the value of the trade with that 5/5, but he may have just ramped up so much aggression already that even this extreme punish might not come back to bite him too hard.
I was going to say, the swing that came off that Blessing of Kings onto the Argent Squire, it just, as you said, he may get a little bit punished here, but I don't know that it's enough to swing the game back in Diggen's favor, or sorry, Tar's favor. Yeah,
exactly, because I think Diggen, looking at his deck, what would you expect? Leroy Jenkins, possibly, Arcane Golem for sure, Argent Horse Rider, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, those sorts of things are a concern. We have seen the South Sea deckhand in the Mulligan. There is a build of aggressive Paladin that doesn't run secrets and doesn't run charge minions. It's kind of just known as Zoo Paladin. It just plays sticky stuff and the buffs, etc., and goes in. But having seen South Sea deckhand, I would expect there are more charge minions in this deck. So with every passing turn, he becomes more and more likely to draw damage.
There is still a lot of damage on board anyway. Leper Gnome is 2 extra damage. If he goes to the hero power, that's 3 damage total from the Leper Gnome, and Shredder, if attacked, is going to bring a minion. Ooh! 3-2 is not bad at all.
Well, and a Night Juggler no less, which is, with a little bit of good throws on his side, we could just see that Lothar be cleared.
Right. I mean, he has the potential to throw 2 knives this turn, but it would be a very, very weak turn with the Haunted Creeper hero power. So I think we're only going to see 1 knife here alongside the Coghammer. Coghammer hitting the Juggler is nice, doesn't get the Dream Knife, so he'll have to decide how he wants to trade here. Probably use his face into the 5-1, and then just continue this direct track of minions to face.
It's an interesting decision because overall the 1-1, even though it seems like less damage this turn, he only was able to attack for 1 damage with a minion instead of 2 damage with a weapon. Over time, Argent Squire should be able to deal 3 damage at least.
Right, it's a long-term investment thing of banking that this Argent Squire is sticking around on the board. He hasn't seen any signs of swipe from his opponent so far, so he's going to make the bet that this Argent Squire gets to attack more than once, and therefore it was worth sacrificing the damage.
Well, this Argent Squire has existed since turn 2, I want to say, so he's going to be going into his turn 6, and there's a good chance that Argent Squire will still be standing by.
Is he going to morph into an Argent Knight?
I don't really know how... we're right, roleplay. Right, Nimsh, get in here. I don't know what the promotion is like for this Squire, but you'd have to assume that she's certainly got a lot of value and is ready to be promoted to a higher position. Sottle, what do you think?
Meanwhile, in Hearthstone, the game that we actually play, there is a Dr. Boom being drawn this turn, which looks exciting, but he's under way too much pressure here, so he's probably going to have to make the reactive play with the Taunt Minion and the Shredder. Probably just generates a stronger board presence anyway, and now we're going to see that that second Blessing of Kings that was drawn on the turn where the first Blessing of Kings was so punishing is going to turn out to be a fantastic resource here.
Yeah, it looks really tough for Tars, and even the Dr. Boom being a great card, it wasn't helpful this turn, and it won't be helpful next turn as well. Silence! Is this enough?
It's sometimes lethal. If the knife hits face, he has 12. I believe he has 11 damage with Silence Blessing of Kings.
Yeah.
So yeah, if the knife from the owl hits face, he has lethal, but it's one of those situations where, hey, I think that's just the play anyway.
Can you increase the chances attacking with the Creeper into a minion?
No, because you lose 1 damage of the Creeper not hitting face anyway. So I think like it's not worth the risk of losing your consolidated Creeper on the board at the end of the day. I think the line here is just owl the taunt, slam your Blessing of Kings, go face with everything. If you get the knife for lethal, fine. If you don't, your opponent still has so much to answer for on the board.
Yep, and you still have the weapon, so you will be in a great position to win. You're not dead as well, even if Druid has the combo. He only will have 8 mana, not enough to kill you from that position.
All right, we'll see where this knife goes. If he does just win the game right here, that knife is not going there. So Tars will be left at 1 HP, it looks like. Still, as you said, Sottle, a lot to answer for. And Druid doesn't really fight well from this position at all, so...
Yeah, it's really hard for the Druid to come back if you don't start racing. Ancient of Lore can provide some heal, but it's probably not enough. There's a 5/5 just looking at you, and there's no way to deal with it unless you use the Savage Roar.
Yeah, Tars is pretty much locked out of this game, the way it looks. Can get 5 health back, Nimsh, as you pointed out, but again, looking at all the power on the board, looking at that equipped Hoghammer, Tars just looks like he might be out of this one.
Yep. Pretty much between a rock and a hard place here. The healing play with the Ancient of Lore doesn't allow him to address the board, and the Savage Roar play that would help him clear the board just doesn't let him gain any health to even get out of range of that equipped weapon. So there's no out here. He decided to try for some Shredder Dreams here to save him, but the Goblin Auto Barber is not going to do him any favors, and that is just going to be game 2 to Diggen.
Yeah,
all right, so we will see Diggen go up in this now 2-0, and Tars is someone who said he doesn't necessarily feel the very common tilt that we occasionally, well, very commonly see
when you
in
lose
Hearthstone.
One,
I was going to say.
Lost 2 games in a row.
Right. Does 2 games make a difference for him? He's got a long road to go if he wants to get back into this. But, you know, Tars, a guy who has said he wants to come in here and win this, so it's not like he's necessarily just completely playing for fun. And we did have the chance to sit down and talk to him about life on Team Melty and what it's like being a French player. And let's go ahead and show what we had a chance to talk to him about.
The reason I joined Team Melty and not one of established one is like I like to be more on an adventure. I don't know where I'm going. It can be really good, it can be really bad, but I like to take the risk of doing great things. I'm Tars, I'm 26, and I'm from France. I did my first Hearthstone tournament when I was at school, at the university. I've never watched a tournament or a stream when I did this. I had like, you know, you have to submit 3 different decks for the tournament, and I didn't know that you couldn't bring decks from the same classes. So I bring like 3 Paladin decks. So yeah, I like Paladin, I will play on it. And they tell me, no, you can't. Oh, okay.
But not 2 different Warlock decks.
When I was little, my parents wanted me to play piano, and I did it, but I did not really like it. Someone come into the classes to present the trombone, and I say, "Oh yeah, I want to try. It's a fun instrument." And what I love when I was playing trombone is that it's way different than other instruments, because it's not like when you play piano and you have to be really good because it's important. In trombone, it's like, hey, have fun, play the instrument, and if it works, it's cool. If it don't work, at least you had fun. So, and also when you're playing a trombone in an orchestra, you can just play louder than everyone else. Okay, they gave me a broken trombone, but I'll do my best. Listen.
Tars is a very spirited competitor, a guy with a lot of moxie, plays the trombone well, and just recently learned that you can't bring 2 different Warlock decks or 3 Paladin decks. That was certainly the message, I think, of the 2015 Hearthstone World Championship season. Not
Absolutely.
2 different Warlock decks, but jokes aside, Tars has a very unique approach to this game. He's not necessarily as intense or competitive as a lot of people. Obviously, he's competitive within the games, but outside, he's very friendly, very approachable. We've all had the chance to sit down and talk with him, have dinner with him. What were your guys' impressions of Tars?
Oh, he's such a likable guy. Super easy to approach and to converse. And, you know, I've been talking to him a lot, and his fiancé is here as well. So, great guy, and I just want to talk to him more.
Yeah, similar impression. I was interested to hear the line there in the video of I'm treating this as an adventure and I'll see what comes. Some people are just like that. They'll do anything in the cause of fun, in the cause of just having a good time. Tars seems very much like one of those guys. When I was talking to him about Hearthstone, he says, "Oh, you know, when I'm just playing Hearthstone casually, I don't take ladder too seriously. I just play it for fun. Only in tournaments do I try hard." So,
yeah.
And hey, what's more try hard than bringing 3 paladins to a tournament, right?
Yeah, no.
Different versions.
I'm going to say it's certainly a bold line of play, but he likes adventures, and that's good because he's got one right in front of him. He needs to win 3 games against Diggen's Druid deck, and yeah, this is going to be one of those uphill battles for him.
Yeah, I think it's still possible for him to win if he goes into Druid Mirror because he maybe wants to conceal his decks for the next match. Like, if he loses, he's not eliminated, then it wins the Mirror. He still has a Paladin. If that's a secret Paladin, he might have a good matchup versus that Druid. And then Mage, well, if it's a Freeze Mage, we've seen Freeze Mage winning many times today versus the Druid deck.
We have, but more importantly, if it is a tempo mage, then that is one of the very best matchups in the game against Druid. But we are going to see the Druid mirror here. No surprise, as you pointed out, Nimsh. This is the best bet to conceal maximum information in case he loses here. You know, you never want to be in the mentality of planning for the worst, but when it's correct, it's correct. So Tars following through here is going to start out with his 50-50 matchup, and if he wins, he can go from there.
It's a really difficult matchup. Robert, how do you like it?
It's funny you bring it up. As a viewer, it's actually one of my least favorite matches to look at because the Druid Mirror is really one of the few matches I truly believe is predicated on the opening hands. And the first person to jump out generally has the kind of an insurmountable advantage. And we look at Diggen's hand, we see double Living Roots, we see Piloted Shredder, we see Azure Drake, whereas Tars is, you know, we see Innervate, we see Emperor Thor's hand, but most importantly, we see Swipe.
Yeah.
Right. There's kind of 2 ways this matchup can go. There's one where it is kind of decided by early draws and who gets the tempo early, who draws the best ramp. But there's also a way that we've been seeing develop in tournaments recently where the game is kind of fairly even on the board and people use their combo pieces to break ties on the board using Force of Natures and Savage Roars for tempo. Those kinds of Druid Mirrors can actually be very entertaining, in my opinion, to watch. And it's a style of Druid Mirror that more and more top players are moving towards as time goes on.
Absolutely, I agree with you, Sodal. There is a lot of tempo ways to bring the Druid back if you're playing a mirror. And also, one of the most interesting ones are where players just draw badly.
Right.
And they have to do whatever they can to be able to stay on board. Interesting decision there from Tars to just use the Shapeshift. Innervate Swipe was not a good decision. Or was it?
I mean, that Innovate in his hand is looking pretty juicy for that Emperor Thaurissan on the following turn, which will make his hand pretty much packed with that tempo that we talked about. Things like the Drake Living Roots combination is fantastic. A 3-mana swipe is fantastic. These are the exact tools that you're looking for to be able to fight your way back into a game.
Right, so there is a bit of brinksmanship at work here, and we do see, as you said, he just chose to shapeshift one of the Living Roots, or one of the Treants rather, off the Living Roots, and now he will have a very, very flexible hand and will immediately force Diggen to have an answer to this Emperor Thaurissan.
He has an answer. In fact, there is a Savage Roar in his hand, so he can Savage Roar and just kill Thaurissan with 2 Trends or 1 Trend and face, and go deal 6 damage, still maintaining some kind of the board. He decides to swipe though.
It's more or less the same thing either way, right? You push less face damage, you take no face damage on your own heroes you would by attacking in, and you lose 1 of the roots. So it's a pretty similar situation.
Right, so the big narrative for this game becomes, we saw Tars choose to not go with that swipe in favor of putting out the Emperor Thaurissan. Does this chip damage from the roots ultimately decide the outcome of this game? Because he's at 21 health, and as we know, Druid can put out a lot of damage. We see Diggen does have that Savage Roar. What ends up being the correct decision, we will not know until the end of this game.
Right, and it's a thing that, there's a thing with Hearthstone where you're taught general rules when you start out, and then you quickly grow to learn that all general rules are nonsense. And one of the things that you're taught early on is that your life total isn't important and the board control is, which in a lot of situations turns out to be completely wrong. Because in something like the Druid Mirror, the player who is at lower health and in threat of the combo the whole game has to make more defensive plays. So your life total ends up directly impacting the state of the board.
Yeah.
So this is, as you said, because of the early tempo of the Living Roots, Tars is now going to have to, in the back of his mind every turn, think about how much damage his opponent can push.
Absolutely. And there is the Innervate top deck, which is so good. You can just Azure Drake, Innervate Wrath, deal with the Drake, and continue pushing with damage. I wanted to say that 21 is still not bad, so Tars doesn't feel threatened by the combo, but he not only is 21, he's losing on board as well.
Right, we actually saw a situation very similar to this, I believe, at last week's America's Winter Championship, where I forget who it was, but they did play down both of the Living Roots. They had that going, and then the swipe came out, and that just completely reversed the game. And Tars had a chance to basically go down that same line, ultimately chose not to. And now he is playing from behind. The swipe is only 3 mana, but I mean, he's not going to tempo out that BGH, it looks like. So all he's doing is hero powering. No threats developed, and he continues to be very well. No, okay, there we go. There are some threats.
There are some threats. Like, I do understand not going for Big Game Hunter at this very moment, because versus Druid, one of the big tempo swings is when one Druid plays Dr. Boom and you do have the Big Game Hunter in your hand. Not only is great, but if you don't have the Big Game Hunter and there is Dr. Boom, it's almost like losing the game right there.
Pretty much, yeah. And Diggen here choosing to go with the Wild Growth and the Shredder here does use up all his mana, ramps up his hand a little bit more. He had the opportunity to go with the higher value minion of the Druid of the Claw straight away and be more mana inefficient that turn, but he pushes himself up immediately to 8 mana next turn, which gives him the potential of using his whole hand.
So, Saddle, I want to ask you a question really quickly.
Sure.
When we saw Tars earlier play down that Azure Drake, he opted to not play the free Living Roots at the time to get the roots on the board, but he did do it there. Do you think it's a question of desperation in this situation, or what was he saving those roots for?
It's not necessarily a question of desperation. When he developed the Drake, I think, you know, the flexibility of using those roots as a removal spell is still in his mind, but then having had to take that reactive turn with the swipe himself on that following turn, he just felt like he needed some minions on the board to build a platform from.
Yep. And meanwhile, Tars is actually coming back. He was able to build up a board at this very moment. He's still at 20. So even though he took initially 11 damage, he is in a good spot. And he is the one having tempo right now. He will be the one reacting to what's being done.
Right, I do want to point out, the unfortunate thing about the situation for Diggen is he's drawn into both Wild Growths really early on, past that initial turn where it would have seen the most value. And he hasn't obviously been able to draw as he doesn't have 10 mana yet, so the quality of his draws following that kind of explosive start with Living Roots has not really panned out.
And Nimsh, you pointed out this is the first time we've really seen Tars ahead on the board, and what's really interesting to me here is Diggen's reaction to that. Diggen had the choice to play Druid of the Claw in stats mode and just have a solid minion on the board. He also had the opportunity to play Druid of the Claw in charge and trade into the 2/4 for immediate value. But his reaction here to losing the board is saying, okay, I'm going to compound on that advantage that I had early. I'm going to push face, and then if I can just get a little bit more pressure in the next couple of turns, any Force of Nature draw becomes lethal.
And it also worked beautifully, because right now Tars doesn't have a way to deal with this 4/4 easily without taking damage to face, and that would be too much, because you always have to be at more than 14 health.
Right, as you guys said, the damage he pushed out earlier is really mattering now as he's choosing to make his decisions. And he does have that Savage Roar, and by not using that combo piece early on, it is sitting in his hand. So if he does get that Force of Nature, as you guys said, he's very close to closing out the game. Speaking of Force of Nature, Tars plays his own just to get rid of the 4-4 on the board and continues to press a little bit of damage.
Yeah, he just has to stay ahead of the combo range and just always clear the board. Even though Force of Nature is not developing the board much, there was no other choice. Just leaving the cat on board or even Zaki with a Shapeshift would be too much. He'll go down.
The problem, sorry, I was just thinking the problem with Diggen's line here is that he's trusting himself to draw business every turn because he can't just draw Force of Nature. He hasn't done enough damage to set that up yet, so he needs to be drawing damage every turn. There's the Force of Nature right there, but he's in the situation where he's still a little bit short. And without drawing a proactive play this turn, he's conceding the board forever, and all we're going to do is trade hero powers to face, leaving Tars floating at this 17 health.
Right, so if you're Tars and you end up seeing Diggen play nothing else this turn, Nimsh, is it safe to assume that that's that Savage Roar Force of Nature combo?
Absolutely, I think it's absolutely safe to assume that there is the combo. There's no need to play Force of Nature, and any other card you can draw, you probably would just slam on the board at this very moment.
Right, certainly obvious cues for Tars. And he's going to have to pretty much play around it, although at this point, he can just play threats, I think.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
Tars is in a great position overall. Can he just play Ancient of Lore this turn?
Oh yeah, he's at 16. There's no reason not to play it, I don't think. Do you even use it to heal up? Because you're putting a 5/5 on the board.
I think that the Ancient of Lore gets played this turn almost certainly. It's just an issue of whether he feels like he needs to heal, because as you guys discussed on the previous turn, Diggen has basically turned his cards face up on the previous turn. We know what at least 2 of those 3 cards are. What we might be scared of is the 3rd card, because at 16 health, then we're potentially dead to Living Roots with Force of Nature Savage Roar on 10 mana. So he'd have to then innovate the hero power if he drew cards to play around that. So even in really simple situations like this, there are a ton of things going through these players' minds.
It's so interesting because if you go for Ancient of Lore and you heal, you're not really developing a big board at the moment. If you go in for a draw, you will try to get the combo faster to be able to seal this game faster. But on the other hand, it's still a tough situation. It will be at 16. If there's like double force, let's say, so force into combo, you might just die right there.
Right.
Oh.
Ancient of Lore coming into the hand of Diggen, and this is always a card you're excited to see as Druid, but maybe not in this specific situation.
I think you're still fine in the way that with Ancient of Lore, you'll be able to maybe... Can you draw into something like Innervate, Savage Roar, or have we seen one Innervate for sure from Diggen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that healing really gets him anywhere here. I think just healing to delay another turn doesn't really progress the game towards him winning. You know, he's still going to be behind on the board, even assuming nothing else gets developed from Tars if he goes with that line.
Shade would be huge.
Shade would be a huge draw for sure, yeah. That's one of the things I was thinking. So Ancient of Lore coming down to draw, not only can you get those additional Savage Roar combinations with Innovates, but as you pointed out, Nim, Shade of Nax Rammus just becomes such a huge breaking point in this game if he can get it.
Well, he's winding down the clock as he figures this out, and I really do agree with you guys in the Ancient of Lore look for Shade play. I think that's, you play to your chances to win, and I think that's basically all he has at this point because the board has spiraled so radically out of control.
Wasn't he dead? If he heals, he was probably dead to combo anyway, right?
He was dead to combo, but he plays around just Savage Roar, for example.
Yeah.
So.
There's Savage Roar.
Hey.
So that's 8 damage, 10, 19,
20 with the hero power,
Yeah, one off.
So, I mean, still, you know, Tars is in a relatively comfortable position here. He chose to go for the spell block with Lotheb on the previous turn instead of making the Ancient of Lore decision, so that's left that same decision open to him on this turn. Having now seen your opponent draw more cards, so the potential combinations of things that can break that 14 damage limit are much, much higher, I'd expect to see Tars go with the healing line here because the drawing card seems to be pretty risky.
Right, I really like to play myself of heal, hero power, trade the Lotheb into the Ancient of Lore, and pretty much just stand pat. You have the Savage Roar, you are going to do that 1 damage, so unless Diggen heals...
Well, Diggen knows that he will go to 16 if he uses the hero power, which means he's not dead to just an Innervating combo. He knows double Living Roots is already out of the deck as well, because Diggen did play it in the very beginning of the game.
That's very true, right? I'd forgotten about that. That's a good point.
So it looks like we are going to just see that trade. see the ping for 1, and this will put him in a really good spot on the next turn, assuming he does not die to, as you guys pointed out, something like Living Roots, Force of Nature, Savage Roar. We've already seen both Living Roots, though.
Yeah, having now had that information refreshed in my mind that both Living Roots were used in the opening by Nimshare, this actually makes a lot of sense because 16 is a very, very safe number. You're asking for really specific things to beat that when you take Living Roots out of the equation. So having gone from being slightly suspect about this play initially with the additional information, Tar's obviously keeping track of his opponent's deck much better than I was, and the resource play for the card draw here makes a lot of sense.
So now the question is, what do you do as Diggen? You are facing those minions here at 14. You are in combo range already, but at this point you just have to forget the combo. There's no combo in your world, but the minions are still scary on board and you need to do something. Can you deal with this somehow? With the Force of Nature swipe you can clear, but that's a lot of resources you're spending.
It is, yeah. There's two lines you can take here. You can either try and react to the board, or you can just make a play to set up lethal yourself and just look back at the opponent and just hope that their hand is, you know, the 8 of clubs and 3 Pokemon cards, and there's just nothing in there that kills you. That's a line that you can take sometimes if you feel like it's your highest percentage way of winning, but we'll see exactly where this swipe is getting pointed. Okay, Diggen is going to continue to fight for the board this game.
All right, so Druid of the Claw coming out in bear mode here. Would have been spread, so you go charge.
Yeah, but this should be it, right? How much damage is there? Not there yet, actually. 4, 7 plus 3.
Yeah,
10.
so swiping the Druid of the Claw and using your face to clear it is the most efficient way of doing that, and then you have 11 damage left with your minions, plus the 1 residual damage from the swipe, so not quite there just yet.
Also, if you use your face to clear the Druid of the Claw, you do put yourself sub
7,
14.
11 plus, yeah.
It's pretty much been established that Diggen's been sitting on the combo for a while
Is
now.
it one off? I think it's one off actually, right?
No, with the Innovate Savage Roar here, does he have it?
7 plus 3, 9. Yeah.
Yeah, he has it here.
He has it. Wow.
Caster
Okay.
math. All right, and Pars is going to live to fight another day. Brings this series to 2-1, so Diggen's not out of the woods just yet. Tars completes the Druid Mirror and will be free to continue on his path to the reverse sweep.
And I think that was a really important win because the mirror match was supposedly the most difficult to win out of the matchups that he has at the moment.
Right, I mean, it's an important win because all 3 of them are important wins. He has to win them all at some time, right? So it makes a lot of sense, but like you said, but depending on what this mage is, it is potentially one of the more difficult matchups as well, so it can make a huge difference there. But as we discussed, the reasoning for him picking that deck was just if he lost, he hasn't revealed really any information about his lineup. So now having got that victory on the board, he's going to feel a lot better about starting to play some of his other decks and giving information away of what they are.
And I'm excited to see the other decks.
Yeah, I'm really hoping for Tempo Mage. Big fan of the deck. Think it obviously has explosive potential against Druid. But let's get to know a little bit more about Diggen. He's one of these players who's coming in that we don't know as much about, and obviously social media is not as high on. But after this video, we think you're going to really like Diggen.
My name is Eirik Diggen Aarvig. It means a lot to me to play for Norway and Gamers League in this tournament. Yeah, I'm just a proud Norwegian. I started playing Hearthstone at the release, and after a while I had to join the army. I was still really into Hearthstone when I joined. But the first 2 months they took our electronics away, and yeah, it was a nightmare. And then I became a guard, which was perfect for me, because there was a lot of dead time and yeah, a lot of time to play Hearthstone. As a guard in the army, I was there was one post where we had to watch the security cameras. That was my favorite post because I could just play Hearthstone and look at the security cameras once in a while. At the place I worked, we had signals when our higher-ups came, so we could see them entering the building. So it wasn't a problem. My name is Diggen, and this weekend I'm gonna make Gamers League proud.
Diggen clever enough to evade being caught playing Hearthstone on the job, but is he
Sneaky.
clever enough to close out this series?
Yeah, I hope he wasn't guarding anything important because, like I said, 80 online tournaments during the winter season, that is a lot of time not watching the security cameras.
Yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, like, I just loved the sadness and the joy when he was able to play Hearthstone on duty.
I was going to say, when we're all kids, you know, the electronics get taken away. It is just that devastating. It's just, oh, well, there goes. I'm done.
Do you play Hearthstone at work, Robert?
You know, I do play a fair bit of it at work. You can walk over to my desk and see me, you know, face huntering the ladder.
I think working at Blizzard is probably the most acceptable place to play Hearthstone while on the job, right?
It's
So-
not like walk up like, hey, stop doing that. It's more like, hey, you gonna win?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a very common thing there. But for Diggen, needs to close out this series. Tars has 2 decks remaining. He has that Mage and that Paladin, as we've discussed. And Paladin, it's really kind of pointless, I think, to speculate too much on what that Paladin deck is. There's really...
It can be anything.
Well, no, it's probably just Seeker Paladin or Mid-Range Paladin, as we see based on the cards. Diggen, meanwhile, still has to get that win on Druid, and this is a matchup which I don't think there's really a clear favorite. Sado, are you inclined to agree, or...?
I am very much inclined to agree, yeah. My win rate has me as, like, slightly successful from both sides. I think a lot of other players will echo that same sentiment. It's a pretty even matchup, but it can live or die by things like, do you have the big game hunter in hand by the time they draw Mysterious Challenger?
Yeah, I think it also depends mostly on the Innervate and Keeper draws. And Swipe is a card that some people keep in the opening hand, some people throw it away. The problem for Diggen is that he doesn't know exactly what this Paladin list is.
Right.
This is the first time he's facing the deck where Tars knows exactly what Diggen is playing.
Yeah, I think classically things like mid-range Paladin have a slightly more favorable matchup against Druid with the the extra outdoor Peacekeepers and stuff, and now you have the Keeper of Oldemans in there as well, whereas something like Anyfin Paladin can kind of get pressured too much early by Druid, so if it was one of the other Paladin decks, then it would be a bit more polarizing. We still don't have complete information. Now we do that this is
Yeah.
Secret Paladin, so this is the matchup that, like we said, is fairly even and can live or die with just a few interesting interactions on particular turns.
Right, so the name of the game, if you're playing this Paladin deck, is just to put so much pressure that the Druid never gets a chance to assert its own agenda. Competitive Spirit, not necessarily what you want to be seeing in the opening hand. That's more kind of something you would like to get off the Mysterious Challenger, but this deck is, by its nature, somewhat finicky, and if it doesn't have the Mysterious Challenger on turn 6, it can often falter.
Yeah, they can, but then they can also like just build up with the minions, and when they get Mysterious Challenger even later in the game, it's still great versus Druid, specifically followed by something like Dr. Boom or Tyrion. But for now, the early game will be the most important, and there is Shielded Minibot, 2 of them even, Coghammer. Those are really good cards to start versus the Druid, and I think it will mostly depend what the Druid will have and on what turns, and then that would decide the matchup.
Right, and this is always an interesting situation to be in playing against the Secret Paladin here, because we're going Diggen is going to attack here, get the news that it's not Noble Sacrifice, and then suddenly all these nightmares start going through your head. And you can see here he's playing around Redemption, which is one of the most common things that you get punished by a shielded minibot. Gets the bad news that it is Competitive Spirit, but honestly, Competitive Spirit proccing on 1 minion there, not as devastating as reviving a full shielded minibot would have been.
Oh no, it's super exciting to get that news. Kind of surprised to see that he did not play around Avenge at all. I think there's a point where you can overplay around Avenge. At some point, you just have to say, all right, I have to start doing something else here with my mana and minions. But Keeper of the Grove, a great pickup here. Going to undo a lot of the, well, undo entirely Competitive Spirit and Coghammer.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, there was a great pickup from Tars last turn, which was piloted Shredder, and he has the curve right now. Shredder into Sludge Belcher. Blessing of Kings being picked up. Do you play it? Do you consider this turn at all?
It's interesting, right? Having just seen a Keeper of the Grove, it seems like a strong play here. You would consolidate a 6/4 minion on the board as opposed to a piloted Shredder. Things work out, reasonably similar, but the argument would be, maybe Shredder is a more consistent card. You can pretty much always play Shredder and it's solid, whereas Blessing of Kings requires, serious situations.
I think I like Pilot to Shredder more than Blessing of Kings, because Pilot to Shredder is not contested by the 2/4 at this very moment. Right. And you don't even need to kill the 2/4 with your minion and a weapon attack. I think you can just go face and just play Pilot to Shredder and continue pressuring the Druid. On turn 4, what do you expect? You expect a Shredder from the Druid itself.
Yeah, I think I like the Shredder better here just because there's less of a punish for it. Even if the Keeper of the Grove comes down, this is one of those interactions where it still does not feel good for the Druid player because you can just get rid of it and you have the piloted Shredder sitting on 4/1, even if it's not dropping something.
Right, so now the Shredders are going to contest each other, but Tars is totally fine with this because he can continue to develop alongside the curve with the Sludge Belcher. Sludge Belcher, one of the natural predators of piloted Shredder, but the mysterious Challenger draw is going to make all his dreams come true next turn, Rob.
I want to point out, Nimsh actually summoned this by talking about Tars's curve as a paladin. This actually just summons out Dr. Boom will come up next, followed by Ragnaros. So, Nimsh, this is on you, man.
Yeah, it's absolutely on me, and I think it always happens because, you know, the Paladin deck is based on curve, and you want to draw on curve. You build your deck to draw on curve. That's why you actually play cards on curve. That's how it works, Rob.
He doesn't quite get the Dr. Boom, although Lothop is a pretty sweet consolation prize.
I was just going to say, since Nimsh said the word curve at least 7 times in that last sentence, does that mean he draws 7 Dr. Booms next turn? How does this work, Rob? Enlighten me.
I would have to ask Ben Brode. Only he can
sure.
tell me the deeper intricacies of mechanics like that. But Tars is in a great spot here.
Yeah, and he is actually not running Repentance, it seems. He was running Competitive Spirit. We've seen one, and the secrets right now would be Noble Sacrifice, Avenge, and Redemption, I believe, which is the dream scenario. You have the 3/5 Belcher, which will get Redemption. Oh, actually, there's Noble Sacrifice getting Redemption.
Yes.
But still, you're in a good shape overall, and Druid will have a lot of trouble clearing this board.
Yeah, the Noble Sac Avenge Redemption combination is like the core package of secrets in the deck. It's the thing that puts you in this miserable spot where, well, any attack I make increases the amount of power he has on the board. So those are the core secrets that you always include in the deck. Competitive Spirit and Repentance are more flexible, and as you said, based on the secret makeup here, we can see that he's probably not running Repentance in his deck.
Right, I want to bring up when we were casting the North American Round of 40 last year, we were seeing people bring Secret Paladin, and they were just losing left and right. And the difference in composition when it comes to the Secrets Broad, we were seeing upwards of 8 or 9 Secrets Broad as everyone just got a ton of secrets basically running Repentance, and this list is so much more refined at this point, and I think it's actually just reached the pinnacle of iteration.
Absolutely. And now, how much damage is there on board? There's 12, 16. There is enough just to win on board.
Yeah.
Don't you think it was better to just attack Pilot the Shredder and at least have a chance for a Doomsayer?
Right. I mean, I think it's fairly easy to suggest that any play was better than the one that left you dead on board. So sure, if there was a chance of the piloted Shredder Doomsayer thing happening, then that was a line you can take. It's incredibly unlikely, and those secrets turns are just such a nightmare to navigate anyway that he just ends up being on the board.
At PGL, Impact was in a situation where he was playing Druid versus Paladin. He attacked into Double Sacrifice, Avenge,
that was
landed
a
Pilot
Katowice, actually. That was a Katowice.
Yeah, it was actually Katowice,
yeah.
right. So Pilot Shredder did drop the Doomsayer and won the game.
Right.
Yeah, it has happened there, but it's a lot of decision-making to make, you know, in that short window of time. And obviously, as you said, Zottel, there is certainly a good 45 seconds where you just spend lamenting the fact that if you attack, you're just giving him more power on board. So, Zottel, we come to game 5 now. Nimsh, Mage versus Druid, and we do not know what this Mage is just yet. And what this Mage is could ultimately just determine the outcome of this series.
Pretty much, yeah. This is going to live or die by the matchups, and this comes back to a point that I made last week in the Americas broadcast, which was so much is done and decided in your lineup building, right? Like, this game may already be decided by whether this is Tempo Mage or whether it's Freeze Mage, and which of those ends up being better for your lineup. Although we have seen and we have made the point that Freeze Mage builds are starting to get slightly more competitive in the Druid matchup.
Yeah, there are basically new Freeze Mage builds with double Torch without Antonidas that are supposedly good, but this is the Tempo Mage guy, so it seems that Tars has a huge advantage, even though he was losing 0-2.
I was going to say, I want to give a hearty, my man, to Tars. Bring in the Tempo Mage. Such a fan of this deck. Explosive potential. We even see the Water Elemental in it, which could absolutely give the Druid fits.
So Nimsh and I can just sit this one out, right, Rob? And you can just solo cast this. Just Tempo Mage is your jam. You just carry it through.
Please stay with me. I'm not sure I want to solo cast an entire match. That sounds like a lot of work. So.
Oh, I was already putting my headset off. But, like, okay. So the Tempo Mage has the coin, which is really important as well. A good start, Flame Waker, Water Elemental, Frostbolt. Rob, what are you looking for in this mulligan hand? Is this everything you are looking for?
I would actually just keep Frostbolt and Flame Waker and then get rid of Water Elemental, get rid of Mirror Entity, and get on the quickest train to double Mana Worm. Just take me to there. That's where I want to be. Mad Scientist is also pretty great, but you definitely, jokes aside, don't want to keep the secret in your opening hand. You want to let the Mad Scientist do that for you, as is usually the case in most classes that play secrets and run Mad Scientist.
I want to say, Rob, if that's a mulligan strategy that works out for you, then I can see why you love Tempo Mate. If you can just summon Mana Worm to your opening hand at will,
Subtle.
I get why you love this deck.
Saddle, come on, I work at Blizzard. Of course I can do that.
Yeah, right.
Oh, we have special scripts right there. By the way, Tars did throw all the cards away because he was probably going on that Mana Worm train. He didn't get it. He didn't get Mad Scientist. He has Apprentice, though.
Yeah, the conductor came along, checked his ticket on the Mana Worm train, didn't have one, got thrown off at the first stop, so they didn't quite get there.
All right, it's important to pre-purchase your ticket to the Mana Worm train before you get there, but that's not a bad draw right there. That can actually do a lot of work, although in this situation, those Living Roots treants are kind of pesky, so you just want to go ahead and get rid of them.
Yeah, but the important fact is that Druid doesn't have a turn free play. Can he top deck something? Not really. So right now, just Shapeshift, I guess, and 2 damage to face.
I want to bring up too, does Diggen necessarily know that this is Tempo Mage?
Based on this opening, absolutely not. He has no idea what's happening so far. And he's possibly just going to see a turn 3 secret come down right now, which would create the illusion even more. Yeah, there we go.
Ice Barrier?
This is one of the few points where Darnassus Aspirin is strictly speaking better than Living Roots, because you used to just be able to play the Darnassus Aspirin. I had this happen to me so many times in the early game, and it's really off-putting as the mage to go down and extra mana against a Druid.
It's such an obvious ice block, right? And now Diggen is like, whoops, I need to rethink my life.
I mean,
not necessarily his life, but definitely that turn.
Yeah, now he knows, but now the Tempo Mage's explosive ability is going to come in here because the Sorcerer's Apprentice is going to come down. The Frostbolt can deal with the first half of this Shredder if necessary, and then Unstable Portal still available to be cast, can even jam the Mirror Image on top of that if he wants to.
Oh, I like this right here. Unstable Portal looks like it might come out. Could just actually coin to get rid of that Treant, but let's bring out the Unstable Portal and Snow Chugger.
Yes,
we're Mech Mage now.
It's so good now, especially versus Druid. I think freezing the Druid and denying the hero power to deal that 1 damage specifically to minions is great. And I think Mirror Image is definitely, right? So?
Yeah, I like it because it protects, after you make this trade, it protects the front half of your Shredder from this 1-1 that's on the board. So I think the Mirror Images will definitely come down here.
Do you even trade? Like, you can just go face.
I think I like trading here, to be honest. Just when you're in this matchup, the tempo is really big. It's a big part of what makes this matchup work for the Tempo Mage, obviously the title, but it's one of those things where Savage Roar is a consideration. You don't necessarily want to let another minion on the board to get through, possibly kill your Sorcerer's Apprentice, so I like getting rid of it there.
Yeah, and you just, like, one of the things you're potentially scared of this turn is the swipe that comes down, and by, like, you don't really want to give your opponent too much flexibility with how they choose to attack with their cards, so the trading away there makes a lot of sense to me.
It's a huge Toad, one of my favorite cards in the arenas. It actually deals 1 damage when it croaks. Well, that's the flavor text. I was wondering if...
Oh, you're stealing jokes from Blizzard now,
Yes,
Nimch? I thought you were better than that.
That'll be $5.30, but Ethereal Conjurer, another inclusion in this. You only generally see 1 copy of it, but the front half of that just doing 6 damage right there. We see 6-3. 3's not a great stat line, but 6 basically makes it a fireball, and you get another spell. What a deal.
And it's not easy to remove it for Diggen. He can only deal 2 damage with Keeper. So a really great situation for Tars. It's a great match, and it's a great situation.
Yeah, the natural fear in this situation is Wrath when you play the Ethereal Conjurer against Druid, but no such thing in hand for Diggen. He just has this 1 per turn clunky minion thing going on, but if you can draw Swipe at the right time, suddenly things come together.
But it's okay, because Tars has coined Dr. Boom on the next turn.
And also, more importantly, the hero power isn't able to be used to get the full board clear on the Snow Chugger there as well. So he's even going to pass up the swipe and play the Emperor Thaurissan, which now gives him access to Azure Drake swipe on the following turn if he needs it.
Yeah, it's an interesting play because it's not like he doesn't respect the damage. It's more about like playing to win and giving yourself a chance to turn around this board. And specifically in a matchup that's really hard for you, Tempo Mage versus Druid, Diggen will have to take more risks. He can't be defensive. If he's defensive, he will just lose this game.
I also would not be surprised to see him playing around what I brought up, which is that Dr. Boom. You are going to need to get rid of the Boom bots. Wouldn't necessarily get rid of the whole body, unfortunately, but it is something to get rid of a lot of damage if the Dr. Boom does come down. And we will see it come down here. Have to assume that Conjurer is going to destroy the Emperor.
Yeah, you have to deal with it for sure.
Yeah, I'm interested as to him trading with the 6-3 as opposed to trading with the 2-2 and the 3-1. I understand he wants to hit face with Snowchugger and continue to lock out the hero power as an option. He's already seen one swipe, which I guess is his thinking here, but you have the opportunity to trade a 3-1 minion that dies to residual damage of swipe off the board. And now his line of using the 3 health minion to trade instead of the 2 lower health minions does open up Drake Swipe as more of a swingy turn here.
I think the value is there with the Snowchugger. That's freezing the opponent.
Right,
And as you mentioned, like he's seen one swipe already.
Yeah, definitely something to want to bring up as a consideration. I have no issues with that choice of trade at all.
Will the Azure Drake live? There's a huge Toad, 2 bombs. And Azure Drake survives, but that's so much damage to the face, and we see Forgotten Torch and Fireball in Tars' hand.
Yeah, that's 16 damage right there, right now, and he can just even play Lothab this turn and try to finish the Druid next turn. If you play Lothab, you block any possibility of Innervate combo, and just to combo after the Torison. 7 damage to face, put the Druid at 12, you will have a 7-2, a 5-5, and 7-2 might only have 2 health, but it still attacks for 7.
Right, Lothab also solves the problem of that Azure Drake as well, because you don't want to have to waste your time or waste your damage sending minions or spells into that Drake, and Lothab prevents him from getting any use of it off the following turn. But
hello,
I sense
brother.
there may be some more role-playing incoming at some point here, guys. Take it away.
Hello, brother! That's what he says, right?
Yeah, he does say hello, brother, when played against Malfurion, and that is Illidan Stormrage, the Betrayer.
I feel betrayed because he will not be played this game.
Featured in, World of
Legion.
Warcraft, Legion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I got more, Sottle, but I can tell from your piercing gaze that you would like me to stop, so we'll get back into the game. Does play down that Lothab, and he has so much damage in hand. Illidan might not even be a factor, and last week we saw an Alakir come out that wasn't a factor either, but it was used for style points.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Illidan cannot be charged, so might just sit in the hand.
Oh, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Should we charge Illidan?
I'm the wrong person to ask, man. This is why you don't want me working anywhere near balance on a game.
I would love to see Illidan charging, maybe something that deals... Is he a demon? Does he have a trade as
Yes,
demon?
yes, he is demon, yeah.
Charging demons. Let's do
Sure.
it.
But Diggen from his side is going to have to find a defensive play this turn. Is locked out by the Lothab, with only the Wild Growth being relevant to that. But he has 2 defensive plays in his hand. He has the Taunt and the Lothab that can lock out spells. And I was just going to say, he might just decide to break that up over a couple of turns here, just to make sure he has answers for 2 different scenarios and 2 different turns. And also puts himself in a situation where he's now just threatening to kill his opponent on the backswing here as well.
Yeah, that Flame Cannon actually might be quite useful to be able to play defensively from Tar's perspective.
Ooh, Diggen about to be staring, Tars is about to be staring down a potential combo turn, so this drastically alters the shape of the game. And looking at what he has a lot of spells. He has Illidan, which can start generating value. You've seen both swipes, but I think this game has drifted away from the value game, and now it's just on who blinks first.
Let me just check something with Nimch, who is my resident deck tracker here. Both swipes have been used, right, from the Druid side.
Yes.
So if you can start generating value off of Illidan Stormrage here, you put yourself in a pretty insane position.
Yeah, the problem is, like, if you just play Illidan, can you deal with this board? Like, you cannot...
You can Illidan, you can Forgotten Torch the Azure Drake, and then you can Flame Cannon, and whichever minion it hits, you clear... Like, you know, if it hits the Druid of the Claw, you can clear it with Lothab, and suddenly you have this huge Illidan board.
But you do have a 4-2 minion on board, and a turn 9, which is a possible combo turn.
Right.
So you might want to go the Flame Cannon right now and trade the minion that's live to be able to absolutely design the combo.
Yeah, I mean, this makes a lot of sense, and it still allows him to Illidan on the following turn with the remainder of his hand and still start generating a lot of value, but there's just the opportunity now that having made this turn of full removal this turn, if your opponent has 1 or 2 minions left in their hand alongside that combo, what do this turn? They develop another couple of minions, they hero power down your Lothab, and suddenly you're just right back in the same spot. So I'm not sure whether this ever puts him in a winning line.
High risk, high reward, but right now he is the one who is pressuring. There is a 5-1 Lothab, and you're not sure if there will be something like a Raft. So if the hero power needs to kill the Lothab, you'll be in a good position. You still have Arcane Intellect as well, so you are drawing cards.
Sure.
If you draw a bit more burst, you might be able to just take the game right there.
Yeah, we see Tars really pained by that last sequence of events. Doesn't even get the chip damage onto Diggen's face, but he will get Illidan Stormrage down, plays down the Flame Waker, and now the last thing he wants to see is Savage Roar or Force of Nature.
Savage Roar is lethal, right? Because it will be 6 + 7, 13, 15, and Hero Power. Yeah, but there is no Savage Roar for now.
Oh, but he's got more than enough time to draw it.
Yeah, this is the second time in this series we've seen someone with Wild Growth and Azure Drake in their hand trying to find a way to dig for lethal. So Diggen is going to begin the process now of cycling through his deck, picks up the Force of Nature.
13, 15,
Oh, wait, he has Innervate, though.
16. No, he's missing 2 mana.
He would have needed the full 10 mana plus the Innervate in order to get all this out. So
1 damage of lethal. So close for Diggen.
Time to draw cards, or do you start clearing with that Force of Nature?
If you clear a Force, you will be only able to deal 2 damage to face.
yeah, I don't mind the Force of Nature line here. The trades that are presented on board just aren't good enough, and just the nature of these minions demands that they are both dealt with this turn. You cannot afford to leave Illidan alive, you cannot afford to leave Flamewaker alive. So the Force of Nature to clear, having just barely whiffed on the lethal there, makes a lot of sense to me. But this might now be the window that Tars needs to get back into this game if he can pick up a few good draws here.
Absolutely.
Ooh, Conjurer.
It's something, but you might actually want to go for Arcane Intellect. What are you digging for, Robert?
I feel like if you're going for Conjurer, you're basically looking for Frost Nova or something to just slow the board down, something like an Ice Barrier, Ice Block. Arcane Intellect, you know it's in your deck, so do you look for something else? You've already used 1 Fireball.
Oh,
the Mana Worm Express pulling into town way late.
It's not bad though. Like you can still Flame Waker into Mana Worm and Torch the Lothab.
Yeah.
And your board is quite good suddenly, and you still have Conjurer as a big minion and a spell.
Come on, Flame Waker, 1 time. That's what you're hoping.
Yeah, well, whatever the damage goes is probably alright.
Savage Roar, which is not enough just now.
Yeah, drew the combo and consecutive cards, but had to break them up, as I mentioned on the last turn, to answer the immediate nature of those minions. Azure Drake drawing Druid of the Claw is pretty solid here, though.
Can you deal with this board, though? Like, you'll not be able to kill both of them, right?
You can Druid of the Claw, charge, innovate Hero Power to clear the 2/4, and then the 2/1 in your face goes into the Mana Worm.
Decent, yeah.
It's not only decent, it's probably going to be enough, I think, if he sees it to close this out, because as Sottle pointed out earlier, Tars is just on the spot where the Druid just keeps playing these beefy mid-range minions, and you just keep having to answer. You have nothing in hand that sets up a winning condition.
Yeah, actually, if he does that, then next turn he will have the Savage Roar and Keeper of the Grove, and that will be enough to kill the Mage.
Right, there are options here. I mean, it's not the only line. You can choose to go with a more defensive line here, but again, the Flamewaker just demands to be answered, so only Keeper of the Grove and Druid of the Claw enable him to do that, and I guess he's going to go with the Keeper of the Grove line here, and now this allows him to add more damage with the potential Savage Roar on the following turn. So he can cast Druid of the Claw and Savage Roar in the same turn next turn and get that extra damage out of his charging Druid of the Claw as well.
All right, so let's see here.
With Nova.
Yeah. Might be time to, it's time to Conjurer.
Definitely. Just going for Water Elemental this turn too soon. Conjurer. You know the flavor text, Robert?
You know what? I do not. What is it?
He might be an ethereal conjurer, but he is actually a solid conjurer.
Wow. That's, that hurts me on the inside, actually. I'm going full Sottle on that one.
You can change it. You can still change it if you want.
No, I think we're just going to get back into the game, Nimsh.
Nicely played.
Thank you.
So what do you think he's looking at the moment? He's looking at free spells.
You know, if I had to guess, I'm going to guess Frost Nova, Frost Nova, Frost Nova.
If you had to guess, Rob, you do have to guess.
Mirror
Image
wow.
is that going to be? Is that enough to protect him? His
Oh my
face,
goodness!
His face will clear out 4 damage at a minimum has to go in.
12, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he's fine. Okay.
Play down that Water Elemental.
I think he might end up pinging off the Keeper of the Grove here, but again, we're in that situation where maybe that just ends up being too passive, and he needs to get that Water Ellie down on the board.
If there is a
he's doing it.
If there is a Wrath draw, then it should be enough. That's why killing the 2/4 is
Wrath off
quite
the
good.
top.
Wait, but this is not enough with the kill of the 2/4, I think.
Right.
Yeah, so he actually played around basically his own death.
He would be dead. Like if he goes for face, he's just dead right there. Oh my god.
Yeah, he was playing around Druid of the Claw, Savage Roar, Wrath with that play, Rob.
Tars is a
That's what
high-level
happened.
player, Sottle. Why wouldn't you be playing around that?
This is a European championship, so, you know, high level.
Sure.
I mean, would you have played around at Sottle? I know you would have.
No, I'm bad. Don't forget about me.
That's fair. You
Soda
are
will
bad.
be dead. Like, Soda will just go for Illidan before and then just die to combo.
Well, astutely done by Tars to know what could possibly kill him. And he draws an Ancient of Lore for his trouble, which is, I think, a big deal here.
Yeah, well, the drive was good enough as well to deal with the Conjurer, so...
I don't even think you need to draw cards here if you play the Ancient of Lore. You just need health, and it's another big minion that you're forcing the Druid to have an answer to.
Okay, so is there a card that just wins the game? Not really, not yet.
No. Sadly, I do not believe there is one. And Tar's kind of living a little bit on borrowed time here, I feel like. He's going to have to trade in that Conjurer to get rid of the Druid of the Claw. And this, the longer it goes, it absolutely favors the Druid player, I have to think.
What about Dr. Boom possibility?
Dr. Boom is always a concern. I'm pretty sure that card looked a lot like Dr. Boom.
Nimsh is 2 for 2 in the last 2 turns in calling what's going to be drawn. Nimsh, you wizard.
I just, you know, see the cards when they want to draw the cards.
I was going to say, because we're in Dalaran, so obviously you've been learning with the wizards of the Kirin Tor.
The Kirin Tor, absolutely, yeah. they help me a bit.
Sottle, I'm so sorry.
I did spend all the
Wake me
time
up when they've stopped role-playing, please.
I forget, which is it? Which region despises role-playing? Is it the European audience or the American audience?
It's just me. I don't
Okay.
know.
I think
Good.
it's solid,
Good,
yeah.
good.
So are you trying to get Lady Eliadarin, maybe? No, you have to play World of Warcraft and role-play a bit?
Guys, I don't want to break up this role-playing, but there's a very serious moment going on in-game here, so...
Is there anything you can do, actually? Water Elemental...
No.
I mean, he's pretty much obligated, if he wants to make the survival play, to send that 3/6 Water Elemental into the 7/7 Dr. Boom, which is just such a miserable feeling, but it's probably what he has to do to live and just ping off the Drake. But he might just, again, get into that situation where he thinks that play is so miserable that I cannot do that and expect to win the game. So he might decide to push it. No, he's going to continue going along the passive survival line, but I think we have potentially entered the territory here where the plays you're having to make are just so miserable that they can just never end up with you winning the game.
I do agree, and this is also interesting. Like I was making fun of Sol that he will play Illidan, but the Illidan play was actually game-winning at that very moment. Like he was afraid of the combo, but if he would play Illidan earlier when he had a chance, ignoring the picking Hunter on
Right,
board,
I made the point all the way back then of just like, this is your one chance to do it, and if you say they don't have combo right now, then you put yourself in a really good position.
Yeah.
And Tar's committed to this line where he just had to play around combo every single turn for the rest of the game, and it's just like led him down this ever spiraling line where he just has to make more and more depressing plays each turn. It just hasn't worked out for him. It may have done with different draws. You know, I'm not saying my line was better, but in this particular situation, maybe the more aggressive line would have worked out better, but it's about what works out better more often, not just based on one particular scenario.
Right, and Tars is truly back up against a wall here. He can play the Fireball, but beyond that, we see into Diggen's hand, and we see that Force of Nature Savage Roar combo. Could have nothing on the board, and that would still be game. So Diggen had to grind out this series at times, but he's not going to be a victim of the French Revolution ours was trying to bring.
Yeah, and is it Savage Roar into Force of Nature or just Savage Roar? Okay, I thought he's going to BM a bit, but yeah, Diggen did win the game versus Tempo Mage, which was a very difficult matchup, and we thought that Tars has it in the bag, but well, not really.
Right, so the Norwegian Hearthstone player who a lot of players didn't necessarily know much about, certainly making a name for himself, not eliminating Tars. Obviously, Tars will be back tomorrow to fight for his tournament life, but this is a really good victory for Diggen to get really early on in the tournament.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. Tars was the potential favorite in this matchup, being the DreamHack winner. I hope we do get to see more of him and he goes through, because I just want to be serenaded with trombones more. That's all I'm saying.
If you're looking to pick up Sottle, he's a very easy day. Just bring a trombone.
Yep.
I want to see more cards from Tars overall. We haven't seen anything specific, right?
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and toss over to Dan, who is standing fireside with Diggen.
Thank you very much, Rob and the role players. I'm joined by Diggen right now, who has won his first series of the day, and it was really intense. And I think one thing that stood out to me the most is that you said that you're very critical of your own play. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask you, are you really happy with how that series went? It was super back and forth and tight.
No, I'm not super happy about my play, especially with the Druid. There's a lot of people watching, and I got nervous, and yeah.
You said that you were also practicing a lot, and even Bunny Hopper, the fact that you met him a week before you were able to qualify for everything. Did he help coach you at all, even before this series, or did you feel like you had to go on your own?
No, we discuss lineups and strategies. We don't do the actual practicing together. but we discuss a lot.
Cool. So now that you won your first match, do you feel like all the nerves will get out? Because, I mean, the first match is always the scariest because you're putting yourself out there. But do you feel like as the series was going on, you were getting better?
Yeah. Hopefully tomorrow I will not be as nervous as today.
Awesome. Well, do you have any final words that you want to say now that you have won your first match of the day and you're going to the winner's match tomorrow?
Yeah. Heia Norge. That's it.
All right, well, I understood some of that. Well, congratulations, Diggen, and we'll see you tomorrow. In the meantime, let's go to the sidebar with TJ and Savitz, who are standing by for a few words about that match.
Thank you very much, Dan, and once again, congratulations to Diggen for that victory. I'm standing by with Savitz. Savitz, I'm going to come out and ask you first. Were you digging that series? Was that series fantastic?
I was definitely digging that series, and it was a really cool one. We went to all 5 games there, and a lot of back-and-forth action. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and one stat that I want to bring up before we jump into these replays here is that was actually the first game that Druid has won so far in Group A and Group E the first day that wasn't a mirror matchup. So why do you think this is? Are people just bringing decks to counter Druid, or are people just figuring out how to play against, how to counter the Force of Nature Savage combination, Savitz?
I really do think that after our last weekend's America's Championship, where we had 8 Druids, all 8 players bringing Druid, that a lot of these players were expecting to see more of it here in the Europe Championship. And I think that Tempo Mage was also one of their decks that were brought for that specific reason, although we did see it go down to a Druid in the end.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at a Druid clip, actually. We're going to show just an opening hand here, and we're going to talk a little bit about Emperor Thaurissan and the value you get out of an innovated Thaurissan. So, Savitz, go ahead and talk through the reasoning here why maybe Tars prematurely innovated out this Emperor Thaurissan.
Yeah, Emperor Thaurissan is a very powerful play, and getting it out an early turn, like here Tars is going to go for the turn 3 Emperor after playing the Wild Growth on turn 2. You can get the discounts on many of the cards, but it didn't work out in this particular game very well for him. Against the Paladin, maybe it wasn't so necessary. Maybe it didn't fit his hand, and it might have been a little bit questionable, I would say.
Yeah, so we're going to actually take a look at the part where he actually used a Thaurissan to get the value. So that hand seemed like it played out, and some players can get in the mindset where they want to innovate out the Emperor Thaurissan no matter what the case. And that opening hand sort of gives you that inclination. But talk again about why maybe not necessarily the best idea.
Yes, I feel like Tars decided very early on that he is going to go for this Emperor no matter what. With this particular hand, the mana discounts aren't even all that valuable. And playing it right here against the Aggro Paladin that you know it is based on the Leopardom, there's so many ways to punish. For something as simple as a Trucial Champion, Abusive Search, and Gork Hammer all end up favorably for Diggen. And the punish is going to be the worst one of them all. Blessing of Kings on the Divine Shield minion, and like 1 drops Divine Shield trades for your 6-mana minion. Like, that's as bad as it gets, and from here on out it just gets worse and worse for Tars, and he loses the game.
Yeah, just sort of a situation where maybe innovating out the Emperor isn't the best choice. You're left with a little bit of an awkward hand. But now we're going to sort of flip the switch and go to a turn just a game later where the Innovate Emperor Thaurissan actually turned out to do really well. And it sort of explained to me, Savitz, the differences between the hand that we just saw in the Innovate Thaurissan value and the hand now where we're going to see it played again.
Absolutely, DJ. In this one, once again, Tars going for turn 3 Emperor, but there's multiple things that are different in this particular instance. First of all, he's playing against another Druid, so there's almost no like real punish that can happen here. There's no good way for Diggen to both remove the Emperor and develop his board at the same time. So there's nothing that can too badly go wrong. And the second thing about why this is a much more stronger play in this situation is that his hand was the kind that benefits more from it. Getting the discount on the swipe, getting the discount on the Azure Drake, for example, being able to play that on turn 4 was really fitting for his hand. So that was a well-timed Emperor.
Yeah, I like the point that you made where developing the board while also being able to use a spell and cycle. You know, all those things were available to him in that second clip where he innovated out the Thaurissan with a lot of value. So just, you know, 2 completely different highlights there showing sort of the same play and its impact. Thank you very much, Savitz, for your insight. Well, we have one more match left to go on the day. It is the second match of Group B. But before we jump into that last match, let's take a look at some highlights from Tars versus Diggen.